Hi, this is Maxi, always empowering each other for a better life, for a better future, for us to enjoy while here on earth. And today I want to talk about forms of abuse in marriage. I know that many people, many couples, they suffer silently in their marriages, and sometimes they don't even understand why they are not happy in their marriage. But today we want to try and look at the different forms of abuse in marriage, because once we are able to identify that this is a form of an abuse, then we can easily work on a way of stopping the abuse in that marriage. Why do I say so? Because there are other forms of abuse in our marriages that we rarely recognize or know about. We may not even know that we are abusing our partners. We may never know that we are being abused. And so we shall look at 6 forms of abuse in marriage. I will call them domestic violence. Remember, violence does not have to be you have been hit, but it has something that has affected you. So when I'm talking about domestic violence, I'm not just talking about what we always know, the obvious things that we know about abuse in marriage. So what are some of the forms of abuse in marriage? I will start with the first one that we all know. When we talk about domestic violence, we only think about being beaten, being kicked, being injured and the like. We call that physical abuse in marriage. Physical abuse in marriage is where there has been a physical impact on the person. It can be you have been pinched in marriage, you have been pushed, you have been shoveled, you have been kicked, you have been slapped. That is a form of marriage, of physical abuse in marriage. It inflicts injury on the victim. It can be as mild as a pinch, but it can go a long way as to making somebody to die because they have been kicked or they have been even shot at by their spouse in marriage. Physical abuse goes a long way in our marriage. In fact, it is what has affected so many marriages. If you talk about people who are undergoing divorce, many of them are divorcing their spouses because they have been physically abused. They have been physically injured. A person who physically injures the spouse, and I'm talking about the word spouse because in these marriages, in these homes, even men are being battered. A woman who batters the husband or a man who beats the wife suffers from a kind of they feel, that inferiority complex, because you cannot beat up somebody if you are not trying to show the person that I am the man of the house or I am the woman. There is something that you are trying to prove to the person. Physical abuse is very, very dangerous in a marriage. And when you start experiencing physical abuse, please seek help before it becomes even worse or even it costs you death. This is the kind of violence even children are able to recognize, because they will see you with a broken arm, they will see you with a red eye, they will even hear you fighting. It is a dangerous form of an abuse in marriage, and one thing I request couples, when physical abuse sets in, seek counseling. Look for the reasons why this is being done and try to work on it. The second form of abuse in marriage, remember I've said there are a number of them, and some of them we never even recognize that we are going through a form of abuse in marriage. The second abuse we'll talk about is emotional abuse. You may never know that you are emotionally abusing your spouse. Are you in the habit of abusing, of insulting your wife or your husband? Do you degrade your partner, whether privately or publicly, like trying to express the negative aspects of your spouse or those parts of your spouse that are the weak points of your spouse? Do you usually speak about them so much? Do you try to to demoralize your spouse just by talking about the negatives about their lives? Are you in the habit of every time, or are you the victim that somebody tells you how fat you are today, how ugly you are, how clumsy you look, how you cannot even do work good, that kind of, working on your emotions, so that it pushes you to a low self-esteem. People who are emotionally abused in marriage, many of them end up depressed, very unhappy, and so if it is a woman, they will look for something to cover, and that might even end up being they overeat, they become obese, they are even abused more, or even the man will overeat or will go into drunkenness, and they will end up being getting alcoholics. Emotional abuse, nobody can be able to describe emotional abuse. You cannot go to somebody and say, my husband or my wife is emotionally abusing me, because it cannot be proved. But anytime you realize that you are getting depressed because of the words, the negative words, repeated negative words your spouse tells you, you know that there is a problem. You need to seek help. Help your spouse, help yourself, so that you can be able to enjoy that marriage together. The third form of abuse that we shall talk about today is the sexual abuse. When we talk about sexual abuse, many of us think only of rape. Yes, rape is a form of sexual abuse. It is true. It is a form of sexual abuse. And rape also occurs even in marriage. When your spouse forces sex on you and you are not ready, that is a form of sexual abuse. How about when your spouse forces you to use contraceptives and you do not want to use them? That is a form of sexual abuse. Or your spouse wants to have sex with you in a way, in a method that you are not comfortable with. Let me say he wants to do anal sex with you, or he wants to do any other form of sex that you are not consenting to. That is a form of a sexual abuse. Or you are not ready for sex and your spouse demands sex and forces himself or herself to have sex with you. That is a form of sexual abuse. Remember that one. You may never know that I am going through sexual abuse. But anytime your sexuality is being forced upon you or it is being violated, then you realize that you are going through a form of a sexual abuse that needs help, that needs counseling. When we deny our spouses sex, it is a form of sexual abuse in marriage. We may never really express it as a form of sexual abuse, but sexual denial in marriage is a form of sexual abuse. And in most of these homesteads, most of these doors, closed walls, sexual abuse goes on in our marriages. We need to communicate. We need to communicate. We need to seek help, so that this kind of abuse can be gotten rid of. Remember, you can never know you are taking your spouse through a sexual abuse until you hear that this is a form of a sexual abuse. And that was a third abuse in marriage. When we started talking about the violence that we get, the first one is the physical abuse, the second one I've said is the emotional abuse, and the third one is the sexual abuse. We have the fourth kind of abuse. It is called financial abuse. Financial abuse, you cannot be able to go to a neighbor and say, my husband is financially abusing me. My wife is financially abusing me. No. It is a form of abuse. When you deny your spouse from going further to educate, to further his or her education, so that it can be able to increase their income, that is a financial abuse. When you deny, because when your spouse works on his or her education, obviously the salary will be increased. So when you deny that opportunity, it's a form of financial abuse. When you stop your spouse from getting employment or doing a job or looking for doing an income generating project, because you want to control all the finances in the house or in the home, you are financially abusing your spouse. When you withhold finances, even for food, that you are the one who has all the finances around you, withholding what is required, you are financially abusing your spouse. Some people go to the jobs or to the workplaces of their spouses. They make noise, they make scenes that causes their spouses either to be sacked or to be demoted, or to be denied an opportunity of growing in that business, in that workplace. That is a financial abuse on your spouse. So anything that you do to one another in your marriage that hinders each other from enjoying lawfully the finances of the family, or getting financial income denied by you as a spouse, you are financially abusing your spouse. Remember, these are the kind that you can never be able to understand, because many of us just know of the physical abuse that we go through in marriage. The fifth form of abuse is called the psychological abuse. You threaten your spouse. Sometimes you intimidate your spouse. Sometimes you talk or communicate, you abuse, you psychologically torture. You psychologically torture your spouse to the extent that they feel they are psychologically, they're not worth. When you work on the self-worth, when you infringe on the self-worth of your spouse, you are psychologically abusing that person. I have handled cases whereby a man or a woman describes the clumsiness of the wife. You concentrate so much on how, when you got, first of all, when fat, she was that shape, but now you bring her in the house and you start every time talking about the weak point of your spouse. You start describing every time how fat your spouse is, and making your spouse psychologically weak, that they cannot even be able to function properly in the marriage, because they are always looking or thinking about the negative aspect that they have. Or your spouse is not able to perform well in bed, and every time you concentrate on threatening your spouse and using that as an excuse to seek extramarital affairs outside, you are psychologically abusing your spouse. Your spouse has not been able to conceive, and you do not know whether the problem is because of you or your spouse, and you are continuously abusing your spouse. You are psychologically torturing that spouse. Or or if it is now the woman is getting miscarriages, and you use that as an excuse to keep on talking ill about her. You are psychologically abusing your wife. Psychological abuse, sometimes only people who are very close to the person can be able to recognize that our brother, our sister is going through a psychological abuse. You use a certain area, a certain weakness of your spouse to make sure that you threaten the person. If you do this, I will speak out. If you do this, I will speak out. And so the person your spouse feels so threatened and just hangs on around you, for fear of being exposed. Stop torturing your spouses psychologically. This always leads to suicide, or you'll find that your spouse will get into a habit that he or she cannot get out of, and that will be to the detriment of the marriage. And the final one that I will talk about today has come with the technological abuse. If you are in the habit of spying on your spouse's phone, laptop, you want to know what is on their WhatsApp, on their Twitter, on their Facebook, the messages they have gotten, whom did they talk to, whom did they call, you are an abuser in marriage. Don't count yourself as being innocent. You are. Or you have put a gadget on your spouse's phone to be able to monitor where they are going, where they are moving. You are psychologically, you are technologically abusing your spouse. Or are you in the habit of monitoring the moves of your spouse. Maybe you have put something even on their mails, that when the mail goes through their phone or their laptop or their tablet or their computer, you get a copy of that. You are technologically abusing your spouse. Abuse in marriage makes people unhappy, both the abuser and the one who is being abused. We need to stop abusing each other in marriage. Let us seek help. When you realize that of the 6 kinds of abuse, you are a victim, stop abusing your spouse. If you cannot stop, seek help. As I always say, marriage is sweet, and when we work on marriage together, we can be able to make through. When you realize that you are an abuser in a marriage, if you are not ready to work on it, I will advise that you seek help so that you can be able to find a way out of the situation. Is your hand too light to abuse? Because when you beat your spouse, the children that you are bringing up, they will be violent children. The children that you are bringing up will have an inferiority complex with them. You work on their ego, that when they grow up, their ego is affected. The kind of children that we bring up for tomorrow's world depend on the relationship we have as a family in marriage. Stop abuse. Let us love one another and grow each other for a better tomorrow. Marriage is sweet. We can work on it together. Let us stop abuse in marriage. Thank you so much.